Hello, everyone. This is the first episode of whatever this channel is going to end up being called. Today, we are going to look at the debates coming up for the presidential election of 2024. This is the very first debate. As I'm sitting here recording this, the debates will be held tomorrow. As you can see here, CNN will be hosting them. Simulcast on ABC and ABC News Live. That'll happen. They'll tip off at 8 p.m. Central. Will be moderated by CNN anchors Jake Tapper and Dana Bash. So as far as biases go, they probably will stray a little bit to the left. But first off, we just got to cover the debates themselves. There have been some changes. For example, there will be some commercial breaks for the first time in their history because these debates are not being overseen by the commission. Both candidates agreed to have the networks host the debates themselves instead of going through the Presidential Debate Commission. So that's the first time that's ever happened. There won't be any opening statements, and their microphones will be muted. That's a big one because Trump loves to interrupt people, get in his opponent's heads, and really try to throw them off. But it'll also make him seem a little more presidential, which some people like. They're not going to have any notes, and so, like it says, they'll have a pen, a notepad, and a bottle of water. No props or written notes, however. I'll be interested to see how they enforce that. If someone has something in their jacket pocket, what exactly the procedures will be, if they want to stop that or let him go and then penalize him some remaining time. We'll see what happens with that. Finally, we'll not have a live audience. That'll help with some of the cheering and the clapping and the hooting and the hollering that goes on. Allow more focus to be on the candidates themselves. But that is a blow for Trump, who kind of relies on it to feed on that audience energy and get those one-liners, those zingers in. So that's what's changed. In the past, right, they've got a ton of viewers. This is the first rematch between presidential candidates in an extremely long time. As you can see here, the first one drew 73 million viewers. That's about a quarter of the United States population, which I think places them second or around there, only by the Super Bowl, which was first. So these are huge. They're watched by a ton of people. As for the last one, it said half all voters, is from Politico, published right after the first debate, said that Trump lost essentially to Biden. 50% said that Biden performed, and only 34% said the same about Trump. When you look at this, 70% watched. Oh, these are voters. 70% watched, and 85% said that they had read, seen, or heard about at least some of it. So that's 85% of all of our voters in the U.S. took in some sort of information about the debate, whether they watched it, read about it afterwards, or heard somebody on TV talking about it. These are big events. They do have a lot of influence. And as for the last time that it happened, right, 86% said that these candidates were interruptive of each other. And the vast majority said that Trump butted in more than Biden, 71 to 18%. So unfortunately, what that does is that it gives people a very negative perception of Trump, right? Nobody likes a bully, really. And if he's not, letting Biden speak, people's perception of him dips. Now, that is one of the big reasons that these muted microphones are probably going to indeed help Trump, because he's not out there interrupting everybody. He'll have to be sort of more restrained, more focused on what he's going to say in response, as opposed to just, saying wrong or cutting in. And so you'll probably see a lot more, hand gestures or grimaces, looks, whatever, a lot of non-verbal cues, but that's to be expected. And if you look at each one of these guys, right, these candidates can influence who people are going to vote for. When you look at this, right, in 88, obviously you had a lot of people saying not too helpful. And 2016, you had 25% say very helpful. 38%, right? That's 2/3 of the electorate who said they were at least a little bit helpful in helping them decide who they're going to cast their ballot for. I will say that this was not done in 2020 or 2024 yet. So I'd be very interested to see that data, especially because we have the two candidates getting rerun. I'm assuming that far more people have their minds made up, as opposed to people wondering, especially if we have somebody like Trump, who's a relative outsider at that time, a newcomer on the political scene. And so when you look at these two guys, right, they're going to reinforce certain perceptions. If you look at mental and physical fitness, this is something that Biden really has struggled with, and it's reflected here, right? Over half say that they are not too confident or not at all confident that he's got the mental or physical fitness needed to do the job. Now, Trump's no spring chicken himself, and that's also reflected here. His health is not exactly in the most prime of conditions, subsisting off of Diet Cokes and Big Macs. But, he was an athlete back in his day. And so I think that a lot of this is going to either reinforce voters' perceptions or they might change some minds. And that's what Biden really has to do. And this is, right, we talked about Trump not being able to interrupt people. Biden pretty much just has to make it through the debate without, having some massive gaffe or goof or flub or whatever, because unfortunately Republicans have cast him as this sort of doddering dementia patient who sits in the corner and drools all over himself. And while that, it's probably not 100% too far off, it does put this image in people's minds. And when you see him up there walking and talking and sort of generally acting like a normal person, casts a little doubt. But Biden has been in Camp David for the last week or so, getting prepared for this. So he's going to be ready. He's going to come out swinging. But as for issues that each one of these guys can cover, number one for Trump's got to be the border, right? You look at Trump's border numbers right over here, pretty much lower than all these other guys. A little spike up there in 2019. Some people said that's because we're actually catching more of the people who come across. That could be, but then you see obviously the giant surge right here. And Republicans have put on that messaging as Biden's border bloodbath. You've seen a rash of unfortunately women and girls who've been raped and killed by all these illegal immigrants coming into our country. And that's going to be very effective messaging if you can get that across. The second one would be energy, right? Trump, you can see under here, it raised a little bit under Obama. And then Obama's second term, let me be clear because it's right there, it's his first term. It shot up second term and then it kept going up during Trump's first term. And obviously, right, you've even seen a little bit, you haven't seen a huge decline, which is good, but you haven't been going up as much as you would like, and you have the Biden keeps draining the strategic petroleum reserve in order to lower gas prices, which is great until all of a sudden we get into some sort of war and we don't have enough oil for that. And the third one would be foreign policy, right? Trump's foreign policy was darn near immaculate. This is a photo of the Abraham Accords, where you have, I believe, Bahrain and the UAE, United Arab Emirates, getting together and normalizing relations with Israel. This is huge because most of the Arab states do not like Israel in the slightest. So Trump being able to go and do that was a huge step forward. He probably should have won a Nobel Peace Prize for it. In the other wins for him on that, you had Ukraine, right, and Russian aggression in the region. Russia took Crimea under Obama and parts of Georgia, the country, not the state. Then, right, Trump came in office and they didn't do anything at all. And then Biden came in and they started to attempt to annex the eastern regions of Ukraine, the Russian-speaking ones, and then all of a sudden it's turned into a really hot war, and now we're teetering on the brink. Another one is Taiwan and China, right? China's really looking at Taiwan. I would not be surprised if they tried to make a move here before the election, because if they don't strike now, if Trump gets in office, I would have a very hard time believing they want to do anything with him. And then finally in NATO, all of these European countries that have great social welfare systems are paid for because they don't have to worry about the military. The U.S. will take care of them. With that being said, Trump came in and said, if you guys don't start paying your fair share, we won't help you if you get attacked. Because I think all of these NATO countries are supposed to be at 2 to 3% of their GDP paid into that fund, and most of them were at 1 to 1.5%, which obviously is not good because it means that the U.S. taxpayer is picking up the tab for those nations. So we kind of flipped that around and started getting all of that put back together. Without that, without the U.S., it's a paper tiger, right? And now I guess we got to look at Biden. Well, I guess one last thing for Trump is be the economy, right? It's the economy, stupid. Famous quote there. If you look at inflation, right, you don't have to have me tell you that inflation is really high. Go out and look at your store shelves. Compare your grocery receipts from, a couple years ago to now. Everybody can feel it. It's not transitory like Biden said. And these are real wages, right? If you look, they've kept growing, and 2.1% per annum in February 2019 prior to the pandemic. That's really good, right? I think inflation is supposed to be at about 1 to 2% per year. So if you look at of course, BBC's got to say, oh, it's lower than Obama oversaw in 2015. Okay, well, what about what's it doing with Biden? And this is the real wage growth here today on the very bottom, right? 2020 kind of spiked up there for a little bit, and then as soon as Biden took over, it's November 22, and then we tanked in March and April 2021, and we didn't get over zero at all until right over here, which is like we're hovering at around a single percent. And that's not good at all. Unfortunately, what that means is that he's about half of what Trump was doing. The second thing you could do is democracy, right? You look at these polls. This is a poll from Ipsos. If Biden promotes democracy, right? This is a standard ballot. People asked what exactly their priorities were for 2024. That's the most important problem. This is a standard one. People said immigration and the economy. Those are issues that Trump wins on every day of the week and twice on Sunday. Sample B, they put in democracy. All of a sudden, you had 24% of the people say that political extremism and threats to democracy are really big problems here. When Biden is going to talk about this, he will cover January 6th and the Capitol riot. He'll cover the aftermath of the 2020 election, fake elector schemes, all that. He'll probably attack the Georgia law that they put in place after 2020, in which they said, oh, it's a crime to give water to people standing in line. You're gonna have people dropping over dead trying to exercise their right to vote. No, that's not going to happen. You're not going to have anybody get arrested for giving out water. What that's for is just to try to stop electioneering, where people in MAGA hats or Biden t-shirts go out and give things to people waiting in line as sort of an exchange for the vote. You'd also have him probably say something about mail-in ballots and signature verification being too harsh, or voter ID being racist, some other points of view like that. Second thing you could talk about is abortion, right? Ohio, this abortion amendment came in, and I mean, look at that margin. Right, 75-25 for yes in Columbus. Ended up being 56-43, and this is a state that Trump won twice, and he's probably going to win it a third time by the biggest margin he's ever had. Again, Ohio is a state that voted for Obama twice, so it's not like this is Arkansas or some state that's been ruby red for generations. This is a working class state. You also had the same thing happen, I think, with Kansas, right, where the voters, this is reliably red states, but they wanted abortion for whatever reason. So, Biden is going to paint Trump as the guy who killed Roe v. Wade, appointed the justices who overturned it on the Supreme Court. It's going to happen, so we'll have to see what Trump has up his sleeve for that. He's probably going to pull out we leave it up to the state's defense. That's what happened in Arizona when they said that there was going to be a new law passed that was going to outlaw all abortions in the state. So 2 Republicans from the state legislature worked with the Democrats, got the bill passed to give it to the voters, I believe. Could be wrong about that. But in essence, it took the decisions out of the federal law and put it into state law, which is where it should be. And then finally, Biden's probably going to tout all of his right, he's delivered on his promises. It says bipartisan legislation, American Rescue Plan, bipartisan infrastructure law, Safer Communities Act, Chips and Science Act, PACT Act, Inflation Reduction Act, even though it didn't really reduce inflation. You can say it did. Americans generally like bipartisan infrastructure, bipartisan legislation, like this says, that's infrastructure, CHIPS Act, manufacturing in America. Even though it might not always do what it says on the tin, right? These are big legislative things he can tout as keeping his promises, build back better, You know, these are all big things that Americans like to see. Now, again, Trump can hit him because he's caused inflation, far and away the most damaging prospect to Biden's re-election chances. But, at the end of the day, that's what he's going to use because it's what he's got passed. And finally, one wild card here is the Hunter Biden story. Here, it's Politico from 2020 saying that it's Russian disinformation. That all these former intelligence officials said, this has all the hallmarks of a Russian disinformation campaign. But, obviously that's since been debunked. It is 100% real, 100% his, and I doubt the moderators are going to bring this up. Joe Biden is not going to bring it up. And so if Trump is going to use this at all, he's going to have to bring it up. Now, the addiction part is a much thornier issue than the possibility of Hunter selling his father's influence for money, right? That's pretty much 100% bad. But a lot of people have dealt with drug addiction, right, or other similar types of addiction. Trump's brother was an alcoholic, so he could probably try to play the sympathy angle, right? I know what it's like to have someone who's been addicted, because it took Fred Trump, I believe was his name. Or, right, Biden could bring it up and say, right, look, my son got convicted of these gun crimes. No one is above the law in our country. That includes the president, who's been convicted of 34 felonies over there, and my own son, who's also been convicted of felonies. It's a way to sort of legitimize that Trump 34 felonies case in New York, in Manhattan. Now, at the end of the day, right, these guys are going to go and they're going to compare their records. You see who's got the better record. That's reflected in the polls. It's Trump by not a landslide necessarily. It's still going to be a tight election, but it's Trump by a pretty decent margin so far. I believe it was Doug Burgum, one of Trump's most effective surrogates out there in the running for VP. He was on, I think, CNN or MSNBC, and he said, right, Joe Biden, he's not going to go quietly, right? This guy has been running. He's run for president 4 times. He's won kind of once, and he's been in Senate longer than dang near anyone should probably realistically have a job for. He's a guy who knows how to run campaigns, and he's a guy who has won several campaigns in the past, right? You can't underestimate this guy. But at the end of the day, like I said, these guys are going to compare their records. The voters are going to be able to decide who is right, who is wrong. We're probably going to see some fireworks. I don't know if it's going to be as many as the last couple of debates have. Where Trump said,
it's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Yeah, because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
or Biden saying,
vote now.
You're gonna pack the
Make
court?
sure you, in fact, let people know
He doesn't wanna
you're a
answer the
senator.
question.
I'm not going to answer the question
Why
because
wouldn't you answer that
because
question?
the question
you want
is
to put a lot of
the
new
question
Supreme Court
is
justice,
the
radical
question,
left.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen, who is on your list, Joe?
but right, Trump does get the last word. Biden, for whatever reason, chose the side of the stage he wanted to be on, which podium he wanted, and Trump gets to say his closing statement last. So he's got his shot. Both these men have their shots. We'll just have to see what they do with them. Before we exit here, I'd like to just say thank you to Andrew from Don't Walk Run Productions, Dr. Steve Turley with Turley Talks, Red Eagle Politics, Larry Schweikart, and Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. I would not be starting this YouTube channel giving my commentary if I hadn't seen these guys do it first. So thank you guys, and tune in next time where we'll talk about Trump's vice president and probably some debate recap. We'll see which one comes out first.